Okay, I'm just going to say this one. Solo queue Mythic Plus. Say you yay or nay in the comments of the stream right now. Let me know, because here's the deal. My heart says yes, my brain says no. As in, the thing of like click button, do dungeon, succeed in dungeon, number go up, happy, happy, brain good. Number get higher, ego big, as we just talked about, right? So for lots of people, the idea that, they don't have to go through this laborious whole process of, just the whole laborious process of, if you're a DPS, getting declined from 500 groups before you finally get one, why not just have a solo queue sort of situation, very harsh leaving penalties, all of that. Why not do that? Because for a lot of people, this has worked out really well for solo queue in PvP, and we're actually getting solo queue rated battlegrounds in the future. Now, I don't really know what the health of PvP is. I don't think it's that good, because I've basically heard very bad things for a long time, even though initially Solo Shuffle was very, very heavily played. Now, I know some of that's because it was an efficient way to progress one's character, but I do know that loads of people enjoyed it. I remember John having an absolute ball of a time, and it's just that PvP content itself, it's like, where is it? It is as if Blizzard have forgotten PvP exists. And it's, they're obviously in this weird chicken and egg situation. It's like, we can't justify putting a lot of time into PvP content because not as many people want to do it, but then that's why less people want to do it. So put that one to the side.
Well, it is investment.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we've had solo queue experiments that have broadly went well. Solo queue RBGs are coming in this patch as a brawl, which means they will be a feature of the next expansion, assuming they work. So, Mr. GM tweeted, "I'd love to see what could be done with an experiment of Mythic plus solo queue." Now, he said an experiment. So this isn't just him saying, do it. Tattles did a video called Mythic plus solo queue is a bad idea. And then this week, a viewer question in the Titan Forged podcast, which has Dratanos, Tettles, and Trell sometimes, they talked about it. What did they say? A watcher on the podcast submitted the following question. Tattles' last video on Mythic plus solo queue, I think, opens up a good question for the cast. If solo queue isn't the answer, what is? Being literally unable to play the game by definition is like the worst problem a game can have. The weights for non-meta specs, especially DPS and LFG, needs to be fixed somehow. It doesn't matter how fun or unfun a dungeon is if I can't even play it. That's certainly a big point. And whenever it's happening, at least some people would say, via a match-made system, kind of changes the game. Now, there could be some toxicity if people know the meta and they get match-made outside of the meta. But it's like the less control players would have over that, the less you can kind of be angry that it's happened. That could be an idealistic way of talking, though, because if somebody queues up in a non-meta spec and then they happen to get match-made with them, they will probably just, flame and get very angry. But the thought is, if you want to play TFT or something like that, you just, you go and you play. There's no barrier to entry. Away you go. It's like that with, everything. Basically every video game. This idea of having to do, this boomer, pre-made queue matchmaking is a pretty antiquated concept. And I know just me saying that, once more, I don't know if we just exist to talk about ideas that would make a certain host of a podcast called Blue Peas please spin around at a high angular velocity. Because I certainly remember the days of the original solo queue discussion when I was a Blue Please listener. So what did the boys in the podcast think? Well, I don't know who Trell is, so maybe if I say the boys, I'm not being accurate. Anyhow, I've always been a huge fan of this. I'd love to have this system. Dratanos, fan of trying it out. The problem is if it's bad but popular, they wouldn't be like, if it did bad things to the game, it would be hard for them to take it away if they added it. So basically Dratanos is saying there's a little bit of a Pandora's box here. It's like, imagine solo shuffle comes out and somehow it just ruins PvP, but people engage with it all the time. Hard problem for Blizzard to solve.
Yeah.
Dratno says the solo queue I would envision would have some sort of rating assigned with it. If you timed keys, it would go up, and unlike Raider IO score, it would go down if you depleted a key.
Man invented M plus MMR.
He's right. That's the only way something like this works. Like, you need a way that a absolute fucking concrete league player, a stone league player, cannot get above stone league by just grinding. Because that's the thing right now. Like, you can just overgear shit. You know, and yes, there will be a degree of overgearing in this, and there'll probably be some sort of rating inflation going on. But you know, I do think that a solo queue, you know, MMR that would go down, I think would work. Tal says if it's a score that goes down, that could be a problem. People wouldn't be happy about that. And then I just kind of wonder, it's like, you're trying to go into a competitive mode, but then for lots of people, they're like, why is it a competitive mode? It's just dungeons in my game. I want to do dungeons. But then it's like, yeah, but that's gear, you know, considerably close to raids. Raids are pretty high effort. So it's trouble. It's all this trouble that's happened once a dungeon has got to do so many things in a game via an infinitely scaling difficulty system. So titles, I don't think solo queue is the right approach, because when I'm envisioning it, I'm envisioning an LFD where you're just going to get matched with random people. There's got to be comp restrictions. Maybe there's a better way of setting it up. Dranos, I think you could do that, though, and it's still just like the better players are going to time those keys more often, and even if they're given a harsher group comp, and you could potentially even adjust the rating so that it matters by how much you deplete or don't deplete the key, and it's always relevant to how you're doing at the margins. What do you think so far?
So far, I think this is interesting because I think I'd rather just blast through this bit and then talk about it holistically.
I feel like everyone here knows it's dangerous but potentially powerful.
That's exactly what I'm getting from this, because Tettleson says, do not worry, this take the good players out of LFG. And Dranos goes, more worried about people who aren't getting to play the game right now. And Charles, like, people just kind of do both then, although a lot of us. But then that's from their perspective.
You need a bit of blue sky thinking of, like, what about... It's very easy to be concerned about the players who are now playing the game, and that is really important, because if they leave, you're screwed. But we do need to think about ways that new players will come back, and the people who don't engage with Mythic Plus potentially could. Yeah,
this is the case of you have to go to where the players are mostly, and that's why I'm in profound support of this, regardless of what negative comes out of it, because I think this is the current mode might have a lot of positives for the current methodology, but it also is an antiquity. And I think antiquities are fine in vibes and concepts, but I think in gameplay forms, having something that's better for more people to come in and understand and play is probably substantially better. And this is where I'd agree largely with Trell's like kind of optimistic thinking of, you'd meet people in M plus solo queue for when you're just playing whatever, and then when you're pushing and stuff, you want to go play people you know. I think that would be like the that's the ideal. I think there's definitely
there are team-based comp games that are extremely competitive that work off solo or duo queue.
Yeah. Now I will say a lot of those have very strict like role-based stuff as well.
Yeah, so like the role restrictions that appear in League.
Yeah, so like you can't introduce that to World of Warcraft in the same concept, because you can't say, well, actually you're only allowed to queue today if you're a fire mage. Like, you can't do that, right?
The dungeon gets to counterpick your comp.
Yeah, so it gets more interesting when it's PvE, and it gets more interesting in that case. But like, it's hard to figure out exactly what the negatives are, because these three are clearly very in support of it, mostly, and they're very clear based on the conversation. I don't know how deep they went into this, but it does seem, based on what I can read here, they were kind of like, yeah, you'd probably this, maybe a problem, people not be happy, but it's definitely a good idea. It's definitely a good idea is the vibe, and I completely agree with that. I think about like the changing it so the score goes down is a drastic change to the Mythic Plus system we've had since Legion. So as to whether that's going to, as to whether that'll like be a case of, can you have a negative impact on score in solo queue, but not an M plus? Because that's two different game systems.
Shit.
That's two different game systems, which means
the negative penalty in M plus is, you know, you don't time the key.
Yeah.
In this, there are no keys.
Yeah.
Because the way to do this would just be random. It would be it would just be a queue. It would have to be random. which would mean there'd be no key involved, which means nobody's like losing a key. And then that means that it really is all about your solo queue rating.
Yeah, which means you can't, unless they're willing to introduce these as two separate systems with separate rule sets for an experiment. And
Yeah, they'd have
then,
to.
but then that the problem is, then it's kind of doomed to fail, because if it succeeds, then you'll have to supersede M plus with it, likely,
But then
an existing system.
what's interesting is, could you cut the keystones out of Mythic Plus and still have it work?
Probably, but it would work differently.
Yeah.
And because it's a fairly complicated system with how gearing works and how scoring works, you would have to worry about that,
Yeah.
because it falls into all the problems of, oh, well, look at that. What's the fastest dungeon? I'll just do that until I'm fully geared. Not literally, but like farm all your aspect crests in one go, because you can do that, is like a whole thing people would start to do. And obviously people can do that anyway by hopping into other keys. So there is a case of you can maybe just make it a more open system, but introduce the heavy penalties and make it a little bit more fitting like PvP, and make it feel a little bit more like a more standard ranked mode. Because in this case, it's a ranked PvE mode. And that's going to introduce a lot of toxicity as well, but it's also going to introduce the element of these are just fucking random, so you can just leave.
Yeah.
And be
Also,
punished for it. But
I think about the experience me and you have had in Mythic Plus when we've played it, where like recently I was tanking. I think you were healing.
I healed a couple and DPS'd a couple, yeah.
But because like one of us was tank / healer, we had no queues.
Oh, it's, yeah.
And I now think like, what if we were both DPS?
Oh, I literally don't.
We wouldn't play it.
Except for in the odd cases where I'm on my main in DPSing, which has been very rare. I've only done it recently for like Feral Druid. I would not play M plus any more than I have to. I would definitely wait for people who's a tank and healer, because the prospect of solo doing stuff as a DPS is such a profound waste of time that this would likely solve my issues and have me play the game a little bit. Maybe not now, but before, like when I was playing the game, like maybe like a year ago, it definitely would have made me play the shit out of M plus way more, because the extra couple steps of having to get into a group and that being a case of I sign up for this, oh, I don't get it. I sign up for this, I don't get it. That can take so long that the prospect of starting it is awful. That said,
you know the way like uncertainty is one of the things that creates the most anxiety in people. I feel like even before some people get into the dungeon, they're anxious and agitated, because that's just what it's like as DPS. Unless you have some app, unless you're the meta spec, have a god tier item level, god tier rating. This would probably just increase the playability of the average dungeon, which is a lower key than people would probably think.
Yep.
And the average player, who probably engages in Mythic Plus less than we would think, it would probably just increase their ability to access the game a lot. And that would probably be a net good for WoW.
That's exactly what I'm like. That's where most of my opinions come from. It's worth doing.
Yeah.
It's almost.
I'm with you.
What was I talking about a while ago with just do the simple thing, and it'll likely be the solution. Whatever it was, I feel like that's to me where it just goes, oh yeah, you're trying to build all these like intricate rule sets around this game, and you're ignoring the simple fact that people want to play the video game, so let them play the video game by pressing a button. And that's probably going to have people play the video game more. And it's different to the LFD in Wrath discussion. Because that was a step change that was kind of, I think it might not have been a cultural leader, but it was definitely like, wasn't the done thing at the time, always. Maybe it was beginning to become the done thing and they pressed the button, but what happens with M Plus is it looks a lot more like other video games, so people will understand the concept and be able to play it more. And there's nothing better for having people play a game than actually get in to play it and experience it. Especially if you have faith in your system, which is pretty good.
Yeah. And like, there's a thing of metas, I think we can bench it for now. Because maybe that would quite simply be outscaled by the number of people playing at a lower level of... basically what I'd say is... if you just followed the meta of Overwatch, you probably would I don't know what it is now, but at least at the time, you'd never pick Reinhardt. Yet, if you're in some Silver League match and you pick Reinhardt and you're good at using Reinhardt, you will destroy everybody because he's one of those characters that does really badly at the high end, but really good at the low end. You would probably have a bunch of things where the different toolkits, you just have a lot of stuff stabilize out because, actually, wait, fucking dude, special alert, PSA! Almost all this shit that we talk about with Mythic Plus doesn't bloody well matter. The vast majority of people who are not pushing 25s, who aren't waking up on Tuesday morning looking at their calendar going, oh, it's push week!
Yes.
I forgot! Wait, it's not all this fucking turbo nerd bullshit! It's not. They don't care if it's push week. They just want to wake up and do shit. Oh yeah, that said, if there was solo queue, I don't know how that would work with like, I don't know, probably fine with advocacy and stuff. Anyway, now fuck push week. Yeah, so basically just a little bit of a thing. Like I remember, doing like stuff as disc. Whenever people's like, disc, D tier, don't touch it, don't put it in a dungeon. And I was like, look, maybe the only way that I could use disc at a Mythic Plus 22 is to perfectly become a squid healer. The squid build and perfectly know how to play it and be amazing. But guess what? With a slightly changed up version of my raid build, I was sitting in there like a Mythic Plus 14 or whatever, just cozy and happy and fine. It didn't matter that I was off meta. Because most of those dungeons are actually just fine. Especially when we're talking about, this new season where everyone said, oh, the dungeons are so hard, it's screwed. Like, for most people at the start of this new season, like for the average player who doesn't even want to do a Mythic Plus 20, maybe just wants to go do 10s, 10s to 15s or something because they're a normal or, heroic raider. They had less affixes, they had, less bullshit, they didn't have a seasonal affix annoying them, and they were probably just happy. That was my experience with Mythic Plus, and I know that for all the people who are just being like, no, the chains in Eldorus have changed. Oh, God. We will never be able to time it again. And hey, that's a real problem if you're playing at that level of the game.
Eldorus.
No, not Eldorus. Shit.
Doesn't even remember the dungeons.
Nathalrus, even.
Nathalrus,
bloody hell.
Nathalrus.
The chains in Nathalrus. It's like, that's not going to matter to the majority of players because they're not doing that strat. Because they're just playing it normally because they're not the top 10%.
Because no matter how much you actually gain from being meta, unless we're talking god comp stuff, which is an outlier, then it's hyper optimization. It's optimization, and people don't need optimization. People need to do things.
Yeah.
The vast majority of players would benefit more from learning how to press a button every GCD than they would from learning how to use chains.
Think about not that many people are probably watching comp Overwatch on Twitch. Think about the number of like grandmaster or master level Overwatch 2 games that are watched on Twitch or are just happening in general. Compare that to the number of gold or platinum league competitive Overwatch 2 matches.
The distribution curve's hilarious, like.
Yeah. So the thing that sets the discussion is a tiny sample set up here.
Yeah. And obviously they are reasonably important in a couple of different ways, and they kind of they lead the aspirational side, and obviously they lead a whole bunch of stuff.
This is like we're selling Ozempic, we've reached second 25, and now we've got to list all the side effects.
Yeah, and obviously they have they're valuable and some blah, 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 blah. Everyone knows that.
Our standard boilerplate. That's what we need, man. We need standard boilerplate disclaimers for every discussion topic. We can just play them in a soundboard really quickly.
Yeah, so then in this case, people just need to open it up to that because that's where the real gains are.
Yeah. Let it rip!
Let people play your video game and you will see profound gains because people will want to play your video game. It's good, and I think everyone who plays M+ has at least some capacity of understanding that there is a good, enjoyable video game experience in there.
Yeah.
It's just that it's usually layered behind or hidden sometimes behind things like community cohesion, people being bastards, the game not being super readable a bunch of the time, etc., etc. But actually just doing a dungeon in World of Warcraft is intrinsically quite fun.
As one of the great thinkers, the great philosophers of our time said regarding barriers, rip the hinges off the door and put the hinges in the fuckboys' hands.